With Denis Villeneuve's Dune, Part 2, one of Hollywood's most interesting sagas is getting a new chapter, and not even the Dune franchise itself, but rather the decades-long saga of its many adaptations. Initially released in 1965, Frank Herbert's seminal sci-fi novel has been taken to the big screen multiple times, from David Lynch's controversial Dune in 1984 to sci-fi's Children of Dune series. The most interesting one, however, is the adaptation that never got made. In the early 1970s, a group of French producers bought the rights to Dune and got Alejandro Jodorowsky to write and direct it, but the whole thing was fated not to happen. The story is told in the 2014 documentary, Jodorowsky's Dune, and it's a ride as wild as taming a sandworm in the dunes of Arrakis. Anyone who's somewhat familiar with Alejandro Jodorowsky's work would never use words like conventional or normal as descriptions. When French producer Michel Seydoux sought him out in the first place, Jodorowsky had already made his two greatest classics, El Topo and Holy Mountain, and was considered a controversial avant-garde filmmaker for his unique artistic vision. His passion for the project made its wheels start turning as he wrote the script, trying to unlock the spirituality behind Frank Herbert's work. He had never read it, but someone told him it was incredible. Once he got it in his hands, it drew him in completely. To make his vision come true, the first step was to properly visualize everything. Jodorowsky sought concept artists to work on the visuals, with legendary French artist Jean Mobius Giroux drawing storyboards and creatures, Swiss plastic artist H.R. Geiger drawing buildings, especially the Harkonnen homeworld of GD Prime, Chris Foss creating ships, buildings, and weapons, and Dan O'Bannon leading the visual effects department. For the cast, Jodorowsky went big and nabbed only A-listers, even for the smaller roles. Paul Atreides would be played by his son, Bronish Jodorowsky, with David Carradine as Duke Leto Atreides, Geraldine Chaplin as Lady Jessica, and French icon Alain Delon as Duncan Idaho. On the antagonist side, Orson Welles would play Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, with Mick Jagger as Phaedratha, Udo Kier as Peter de Vries, Gloria Swanson as Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohayim, and Salvador Dali as the Padishah Emperor Shed Am4. For the soundtrack, Jodorowsky got progressive rock icons Magma and Pink Floyd. His goal was to make a film that gives LSD hallucinations without taking LSD. As epic as everything around Alejandro Jodorowsky's Dune sounds, getting it from paper to screen would prove an impossible feat. There was a ton of promise in the project, with Jodorowsky himself believing that it would change the world. But when it was time to find a studio willing to finance it, no one was willing to. The main argument was about the high financial risk that a film like this represents, and there was no end to the frustration and heartbreak that followed. Even though Jodorowsky's adaptation of Dune was never created, his son, Bronish, summed everything up perfectly in Frank Pavich's documentary, Jodorowsky's Dune. The film was killed, but you can hear in some films, I am Dune, I am Dune. The reference is to how Paul Atreides would die in their movie, and then the people of Arrakis would stand up and say, I am Paul. In the end, what Jodorowsky envisioned was so epic in scale that it became the myth he wanted, just not in the way that he planned. Dune, Part 2 is in theaters now.